Nate Harper had spent 3 decades building worlds that didn't belong to him. From the rooftops of downtown Denver to the hidden courtyards of private art museums, Nate's hands had shaped nature into visions of serenity for clients who would rather pose beside a koi pond than plant a single shrub themselves. He designed meditation gardens for CEOs, labyrinth trails for Silicon Valley transplants, and even a Zen eco-retreat for a billionaire who promptly moved to Bali a week after it was completed. Through it all, Nate carried a quiet ache. Beneath the designer mulch, behind the polished blueprints, lived a man who longed for earth that didn't need approval. Land he didn't have to rent by the hour or fit inside a vision board. A space untouched by human arrogance. A place where you could breathe. That desire had rooted itself early. Long before he drew his first landscape plan, he'd been a boy with muddy boots walking alongside his father through the cold, whispering woods of rural Colorado. Those memories, sunlight breaking through pine limbs, steam rising from a thermos of coffee, frost crackling beneath deer tracks, never left him. So when his great-uncle died and left behind a modest fortune, Nate didn't hesitate. He combined the inheritance with years of careful investments, sold his Denver condo, and did what few men do at 39. He retired, not out of burnout or boredom, but because he had finally found a cabin for sale in the one spot on the map he'd always circled in his heart, the foothills of Golden, Colorado. The listing was simple but precise. Rustic 2-bedroom cabin on 40 acres of forest. Comes with uninterrupted access to adjacent private wilderness parcel. Most people would see uninterrupted access as realtor jargon. Nate saw freedom. The drive to the property felt like descending into an older version of the world. Paved roads gave way to gravel. Cell service vanished. When the real estate agent's Jeep finally rolled to a stop, Nate stepped out and felt something click into place inside his chest. Ponderosa pines towered over the clearing. The air was so clean it felt like drinking from a glacier. From the rear deck, he could see treetops stretching to the horizon. A hawk glided silently overhead, as if approving of the new arrival. Nate didn't walk through the cabin, didn't check water pressure or foundation cracks. He turned to the agent and said, "I'll take it." He offered $50,000 above asking, knowing places like this didn't linger long. It wasn't a home. It was a reclamation of peace, of solitude, of something primal he couldn't quite name. The cabin was just a bonus. The real treasure was the land. The cabin itself was humble, exposed beams, a wood-burning fireplace, knotty pine walls with the smell of time soaked deep into the grain. Nate spent a week turning it into a reflection of his memories. Old hunting gear from his father was mounted above the hearth. A bookshelf held dog-eared copies of Thoreau, Muir, and Aldo Leopold. But the backyard, that was something else. 40 acres of wilderness. No fences, no leash laws. Just trees, ravines, deer trails, and wind. At night, the wind moved through the pines like waves across a midnight sea. Coyotes called from far off, and the stars burned with an intensity you couldn't find in cities. Nate often stood on his deck with a mug of black coffee and stared into the darkness, not afraid but in awe of silence, of wildness, of finally owning something real. He envisioned clearing Trey. The next morning, Nate skipped his usual trail walk. He made coffee, black and bitter, and sat at his reclaimed wood desk with the curtain pulled back, staring into the forest that now felt occupied. The paper citation sat beside him like a dare. Denise had stirred something deeper than frustration. Nate wasn't just angry. He was alert. He spent the next 6 hours cross-referencing his title deed with Jefferson County's official GIS tool, printed maps, and zoning records. The result? His property was indisputably his, parcel 72 to 403. The boundary line traced around the cabin extended deep into the forested ridge and then connected with a larger private woodland parcel labeled Private Recreational Reserve, Independent Trust, Wildwood Holdings. That trust, Wildwood Holdings, was the remnant of Wildwood Estates Incorporated, a developer that existed decades ago before dissolving and transferring its holdings into a non-public trust. Nate's deed specifically listed perpetual recreational access to the adjacent Woodland Trust parcel. It was legal. It was recorded. It was final. He wasn't trespassing. He was living within the full rights of his property. So why did Denise Harrow act like he was on borrowed ground? Why did her map claim land that legally belonged to someone else? He pulled up the HOA's website again, downloaded their community map PDF. It looked polished on the surface, roads, cul-de-sacs, greenbelt corridors. But when he layered it against the county map using basic image editing software, the truth leapt out like a spark. The HOA had redrawn its boundaries, and not subtly. Where the county map ended, the HOA's version continued, absorbing nearby woods, ravines, and wildlife corridors into a falsely marked preservation area. Nate zoomed in. They had drawn HOA boundaries over parcel 72 to 403. Over his land. It wasn't a mistake. It was a land grab. Maps don't lie, unless someone makes them lie. Nate had seen it before, working for clients who wanted to claim viewshed rights or blur zoning overlays to push permits through. Most of the time, it was harmless gray area politicking. But this wasn't gray. This was a white-collar lie scribbled in green ink. The HOA's map was fraudulent. He confirmed it in multiple sources. The county GIS tool, which showed clear legal boundaries. The Jefferson County Clerk's Land Archive, where he pulled older records. The original 1989 subdivision plat, which excluded the adjacent Woodland Trust parcel from any community governance. It all came back to that footnote on his deed. Perpetual right to use, traverse, and maintain natural access to the adjacent Wildwood Trust parcel. Exemption 4B for municipal annexation and HOA jurisdiction. That clause had protected his land from future HOA expansion. Denise had either ignored it or deliberately buried it. Either way, she had no legal ground to stand on. And yet, she had brought a police officer into his forest and handed him a citation like he was poaching elk in Yellowstone. Nate printed out every document, every satellite overlay, every plat record, and stapled them into a manila folder he labeled. Forest theft, phase 1. He was done playing neighbor. It was time to play watchdog. As Nate dug deeper into the Wildwood Trust name, he discovered something strange. The trust wasn't listed in any modern HOA paperwork. No meeting notes, no newsletters, no financial disclosures. It was like it had vanished. But the Jefferson County land records told a different story. Wildwood Estates Incorporated had filed paperwork in 1987 to designate certain undeveloped parcels, including. Nate sat beneath a canopy of evergreens, surrounded by maps, boundary surveys, and his laptop glowing with court access records. The deeper he dug, the more blatant the scheme became. The HOA's claim on his land wasn't just misguided, it was fabricated. Wildwood Estates Incorporated, the original developer who sold his cabin, had been defunct for over 20 years. The HOA, Pine Run Village, had no recorded legal merger or transfer of rights to his land. His property was excluded from the articles of incorporation and not subject to any recorded covenants. He contacted a local attorney, Erica Daniels, who specialized in property and land disputes. Nate forwarded every document he had. Within a day, Erica confirmed his suspicions. "Your land isn't just outside their jurisdiction," she said. "It was deliberately misrepresented on their map. Someone altered boundary documents to include it." Using his design software, Nate overlaid the original survey with the HOA's digital boundaries. The HOA's version had been cropped and skewed, his entire 40 acres conveniently pulled into a buffer zone labeled Future Protected Greenbelt. It was sloppy, almost brazen. Nate was reminded of all the times he'd been forced to correct boundary encroachments in luxury builds. But this time, the violation wasn't accidental. It was predatory. Erica filed a quiet title action, requesting the court confirm Nate's unencumbered ownership and strike down any HOA claims. Simultaneously, she filed a cease and desist order against the HOA, preventing further fines or trespassing under the guise of enforcement. A breakthrough came unexpectedly through Nate's old friend, Jeremy Liu, a land developer and civil planner. Nate sent him the HOA's Greenbelt documents, hoping for insight. Hours later, Jeremy called, voice tight. You're going to want to hear this. That Harrow Valley Holdings, the LLC listed as a historical land manager for your forest? It's a shell company, created 5 months ago, owned by Denise Harrow. Nate's blood ran cold. Jeremy pulled up more documents. She filed a forged lease agreement between the HOA and Harrow Valley Holdings, retroactively dated to 2004. The lease falsely grants the HOA stewardship over undeveloped lands within Wildwood's original footprint, including your 40 acres. That's how she's justifying enforcement. But it's not valid. Harrow Valley never owned the land to lease it in the first place. Denise had written her own fake permissions, used them to redraw maps, and started enforcing community rules on land she had no legal access to. Worse, she issued fines and possibly collected dues from other remote homeowners under these false claims. It was full-on fraud, and it was unraveling fast. Erica and Jeremy filed a complaint with the state attorney general and submitted evidence to the local police. Nate's situation had gone from a land dispute to an active criminal investigation. Nate didn't want revenge. He wanted transparency. He created a public website called my40acrestruth.com and uploaded scanned surveys, side-by-side map comparisons, legal filings, and timelines of interactions. He even included audio clips of his HOA meeting and the initial confrontation in the woods. The page spread like wildfire across the community's Facebook group. Neighbors were stunned. Dozens had been fined or warned for walking on what they thought were HOA trails that were in fact private property. Some, like Chloe, had silently accepted the HOA's explanations. But now, the curtain had been ripped away. Nate and Erica held an open Q&A session at the town hall. Residents packed the room. One elderly man admitted the HOA fined him for building a tool shed. Turns out,